Hello and welcome to the MBOM podcast, where you'll learn to master the business of yoga. MBOM is a proud part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Amanda Kingsmith. I'm a 500-hour registered yoga teacher, a yoga business coach, and a total business geek. Here at MBOM, you'll learn everything you need to know to create a sustainable yoga business by learning from myself and guests from around the world about how they built their yoga businesses, and about how you too can become a successful yoga teacher, studio owner, and much more. All right, let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the MBOM podcast. I am super excited, as always, that you've joined me for today's episode of the show. And I just want to give a big thank you for those of you who are here listening to the episode. I know there's tons of podcasts that you can listen to, and I'm really grateful that you choose to listen to this one. This week on the podcast, I am thrilled to be joined by Jessica Hastings-Lesperance. Jessica is a yoga teacher, a fitness enthusiast, as well as an advocate for mental health. She's also the owner of Cedar Wellness Studio. And in this week's episode of the show, Jessica shares how the loss of a family member and grief led her to becoming a yoga teacher, what it was like to start a fitness business facility with 200 plus members and instructors, and why she ultimately decided to close that business. And then she also shares why she decided to open her yoga studio, Cedar Wellness Studio, what that was like, as well as some of her top tips that she's learned through running businesses and owning a yoga studio. And this episode is seriously jam-packed with golden nuggets, pieces of advice, words of wisdom, and so many good tips from her experience as a business owner and as a yoga studio owner. So I think that there's something that everyone here can take away from this episode, and I hope that you just really enjoy hearing Jessica's story and learning from her and so much more. Before we dive into the episode, I just want to give a quick little shout out to the sponsor for this episode, Offering Tree. Offering Tree is truly a one-stop shop for all things yoga business, everything from your yoga teacher website to your class scheduling, to marketing, to memberships, video on demand, and much more. So if you want to check out Offering Tree and get an awesome little discount, you can head on over to offeringtree.com/MBO. And I'm going to tell you more about Offering Tree and some of the cool things that they have going on a little bit later on. So stay tuned for that. And without further ado, here is Jessica. Jessica, welcome to the show today. I'm excited to have you here with me.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and share so many awesome things.
Yeah, I think that this conversation is going to be really great. And can you just start by sharing where you're joining us from?
Yeah, so I am from a small town, Wyerton, which is not too far from Sauble Beach or Owen Sound. I'm definitely a country girl. And it's beautiful today. It's kind of nice and a little bit cold at the same time. So it's a great day.
Amazing. It's so funny. I just had somebody else on the podcast who's from the country, but was like, yeah, have you heard of Owen Sound? Like right around there. So that's kind of a small world.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's a good world. Yeah.
Amazing. So much good stuff to dive into, but maybe we can start with your yoga story. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got into yoga and what inspired you to become a yoga teacher?
Of course. This is always my favorite part because I feel like there is a lot of people out there who are experiencing the same thing and are kind of wondering, how do I make that jump into being a teacher and creating your own studio? So I first got into yoga when my girlfriend actually was teaching locally. And this was probably about 8 years ago. And it just kind of fell in that I was her assistant. I would help her set up for classes. She also taught stand-up paddleboarding yoga. So I would help her load the boards. I would help her, meet the people. And I loved every second of it. It was fun. It was intriguing to me. The science and everything behind it as well. So I kind of just was the assistant. And then what inspired me to become a yoga teacher was my dad passed away about 6 years ago. And my family and my oldest son, who's now 11, experienced anxiety and grief, of course. And I always thought to myself, I really want to take my teacher training. And I felt earlier, before dad passed, that, it's a lot of money. usually you have to go away for 1 or 2 weeks at a time. And I didn't feel that was like a possibility for me at the time, and how much it costs as well. So when dad passed, I kind of made this commitment to myself that anything I wanted to do, I would do it. And I was choosing what I now realize is called a life by design. So I made that commitment. I jumped all in, and I seen this one training that was called Warrior Kids. And I thought to myself, if I take this training, I could help my son with his anxiety and how I can get him to go to school because he was so anxious for back to school. Turns out I took that training and actually had nothing to do with kids. It was actually all about the inner child in us as adults, moving through childhood trauma. So that intrigued me even more. And there was this huge teacher training, this specialty track. So I dove in, I took that. I was even more inspired. I loved every second of it. And that's kind of what inspired me become that yoga teacher. I seen the need in our family. I was very passionate. I call myself a nerd with the science part of yoga. So I love learning about it and then actually taking action and incorporating it into my yoga and our family because it all mingles well together and it's so, so useful.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's a really beautiful story. And obviously, there's heartbreak and grief that comes with that. But I think it's just really amazing that you were able to kind of take that and say, how can I support myself? How can I support my family? And that, yoga was the answer to that. And so I'm curious, after you became, a yoga teacher, did you start teaching right away, or what was your journey with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I did. I took my trainings a little bit different than the common person. I've been working with life coaches and business coaches for about 8 or 10 years now. And I got stuck at the one point in our coaching where I said, leaving my son, who my dad just passed, is not feasible for me to take this, 1 or 2 week yoga training. So she said, there's always a way, figure it out. So I did. I went and I researched different companies, different ways they had it. And Yoga Fit happened to have how they did it was they split it up into levels. So level one would be 2 days, and then you just kept taking the levels up to level five, and then that was your 200 hour. And they teach you that you take your level one and you start teaching immediately to kind of throw yourself into it. So I did that. And at the time, my parents owned a huge fitness facility. So I was teaching about 7 classes a week there. And I loved it. It was definitely my experience of, being a beginner yoga teacher and learning so much through that. So I did jump in and started teaching right away.
Amazing. That's a really cool program. And I think something that like I for sure could have used when I started teaching. My journey was like I traveled to Bali and then came back and I was like, oh, I'm ready to teach, but like, how the heck do I actually do this? Like how do I actually get into a studio? And I wasn't taught any of that in teacher training. So it's amazing that you were able to kind of have that support.
Yeah, I'm very grateful for it. And it's getting over that fear and going with the flow too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing that's really hard when you start out is, pitching yourself on something that you've never really done before, and even identifying yourself as something that you've never really taught before. Like, hey, I'm a yoga teacher, but I've never really taught yoga before. And there's kind of this balance of like, I guess, waiting to dive in till you're ready, but also recognizing that you're never really going to feel ready because in order to feel ready to teach, you kind of have to just start teaching. It's a bit of a mind trip.
It is, yeah. I totally agree. We're never really ready because there's so much to learn, and we're constantly learning. That's what intrigues me is I'll take this course or I take a lot on the vagus nerve, brain science, and that's my favorite. And I just incorporate it and weave it in and, each day is different. It's fun.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And so tell me a little bit about your journey with opening, the fitness facility that you ran.
That's a great question too. So my parents actually owned the fitness facility before my husband and I purchased a percentage of the business and went partners. So they had it, I think, for about 6 years before they approached my husband and I and said, we want the business to be taken to a next level. We feel you'd be a good fit. And my husband and I, as we always do, we jump in. Yep, we're good. Let's do it. So my husband went and got his personal training certificate, and I had already had, I teach spin, pound, and at the time I was doing my yoga as well, and I loved all of it. So they had it previously, and then we purchased a percentage of it, and that's how our journey started, being partners with my parents.
Okay, that's awesome. And so, can you tell me what year that was?
The year we started. Actually, it was the year my dad passed away because my daughter was 3 months when my dad passed away. I think that was about 2015, actually.
Okay, sounds good. And so, how long did you run the fitness facility for before you guys decided to shut it down?
So, really good question, too. I feel, if I remember correctly, about 4 years. When we decided to close, I had our third baby. And at the time, we actually owned four businesses total. So we had a retail store, an organic food store, a farm, a tree removal business, and the facility as well. And we had just had our third baby. So we were
That
busy.
sounds very busy.
Yes, it was
I feel
very
like I just got overwhelmed for you.
yeah. Yes, it was overwhelming, definitely in survival mode. My favorite part about it, though, is I experienced so many different moving parts, and we had a good variety of businesses too. We had service, we had retail, a farm. The networking we created was unreal and amazing. I met so many incredible entrepreneurs. That's always my favorite part. My passion is, meeting the creators, meeting the other people who are doing it too. And I learned so many ways on how not to run a fitness facility, which is so intricate as it really relates to having our yoga studio now.
Yeah, yeah, and I want to dive into that, but before we get there, maybe let's talk about, so you ran the fitness facility for, yeah, you said 4 years, so we're around 2019 now. You've just had a baby, your third baby. You have a bunch of other businesses going on, and totally makes sense to kind of feel like, hey, I need to step back from one. At what point did you feel like, hey, we want to take on something else and something different, and why a yoga studio versus like the fitness facility?
So it basically came to moving through grief and anxiety with my son, and everyone in our family experienced it as well. Managing staff and all four businesses. In the gym, we had a very high number. I think we're at about 150 members at the time, or 170, in and around there. So managing and creating systems to, retain our people, it is a full-time job. And we learned the fitness facility really needs to be owner operated until we can get it to the level where we could leverage it out to hire a manager. So we're in the process of that. And I came home one day after we had our son. He was probably about 4 months old. And I said to my husband, I said, I love what we do, although I really, really value my family time. And I feel that I want a higher percentage of my family time than what we're getting with everything we're doing. And we had many discussions months before we chose to close. And we actually applied for a very large grant for the fitness facility to make it bigger. We looked for other properties to move it to a different property so we can bring in more programs. We approached some people to buy it. We feel we exhausted so many avenues. And, ironically enough, they all just didn't work out for one reason or another. And I said to my husband, well, I feel we're presented with a choice. Is this the long thing we want to do? And what is our gut telling me? And I'm very in tuned. My gut was telling me this is not the route that's going to give me the most family time. So we decided that for us in family time and 3 kids, it's best that we close. And what's even more ironic is we put the notice out to members, and 2 days later, COVID hit and we were in lockdown.
Oh my
We,
gosh.
I know. So we took that as a sign from the universe. We're on the right track. We tried so hard keeping the gym in the community. And even funnier, we actually sold all of our businesses. We sold the tree removal, we sold the organic food store we had, we sold part of our sheep that we had, and we kept the farm and we closed the fitness facility. And we went all in real estate, which is what my husband's business is. And I knew I still wanted to teach. So that's where we led to opening the yoga studio, Cedar Wellness Studio.
Amazing. And so obviously like pandemic hits and it's not, the best time to open a yoga studio. Can you tell me kind of like the journey to actually opening it, when you guys opened and what that's been like?
Yep. It's a very interesting journey. It's always my favorite story because I feel my husband and I are such entrepreneurs. Let's start a business in the middle of a lockdown after we just sold everything. So we did, and it was 2018 or 2019, we opened the studio in March, and we renovated it during that winter. And our original idea actually was to create a treehouse yoga studio on the back of our 50 acres that we have. And as we kept trying to make it work, things just kept popping up. We were getting into permits. We were getting into really off grid. We couldn't get water back there. We'd have to do solar. And we were okay with all of that, although the time frame I wanted to really work with was much sooner than what the build would have been. So my husband came up with this immaculate idea. We have a 24 by 48 shop on our property, and we weren't really using it. So he said, hear me out. What if we create that and just renovate the building and make that your studio? And I pushed back for a bit because I really imagined this beautiful treehouse in the back. And then I said, you know what, you're right. If I want the time frame I want, this is the best fit. And we did it. We did it in 3 months. I learned to leverage my time, and I hired my girlfriend who's very good at interior design. And we created a yoga experience. So the whole back wall of the studio is all windows and it opens to the forest. So it was quite fun and a very fun journey too.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds amazing. Obviously, like the treehouse idea sounds very cool too, but I love the idea of being able to practice in kind of this barn type space with like big windows and stuff like that. I feel like that sounds equally as amazing, especially facing out to the woods and that type of thing.
Yeah, it's a very nice space. And each year, my goal is to invest in the studio. This year, I replaced the garage door. So it's this beautiful door with windows, and it moves all the way up and down where the old one would get stuck halfway. So we've learned through our coaching is you always need to be investing in your business. And even if it's creatively, so this was my way of because I always love getting new equipment, as any instructor does. So this was a fun way for me to say, okay, how can we make the space look even cooler and funner and more inviting?
Yeah, yeah, I love that, and I think that that's a really great business tip. Is always be investing in your business. And so maybe we can get into some of your other top tips for owning a business slash running a yoga studio. I know you have a lot of experience as an entrepreneur. Like you've mentioned, lots of businesses outside the wellness space, and then kind of your two main businesses within. So, can you share with me some of your top tips for owning a business slash running a yoga studio?
Of course, I love this part as well because if I fast forward and listen to a podcast like you do, or, read a book and read those top 8 or 10 tips, I would feel so much on path. So my number one tip, feel the fear and do it anyways. Every training I've took, it's the 4 coaches I work with. Anything and everything, brain science, everything I read and learn is all about our fear center in the brain. So if we can get over the fear of what if, or what if they say this, don't worry about that. Because at the end of the day, they're not really focused on that. They're trying to see, how can I feel the best for what the service you have to offer? So number one, get over the fear now. Really, it's us being in our own way, and magic will happen. We just have to trust ourselves, because it will.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, I always have learned from experience having the 4 businesses and feeling like we're just running all over the place, is really narrow down and pick one thing. So for example, my husband chose real estate. I chose a yoga studio. I'm also studying for real estate. It's a family business. So we really narrowed it down as to what do we love, what works best for our family, and what are we passionate about? Because you have to be passionate about it or it's not going to work. And third one would be go all in. You have to. If we don't go all in and we have 1 foot forward and 1 foot back, again, we're in our own way. So imagining and ask ourselves, what would it look like if I threw 100% of my passion and love into what I want to do and what do I want to accomplish? So go all in. I have to tell you, go all in. The next one would be the only person holding us back is you. We've mentioned that already. There's always a way. I say, figure it out, ask questions, hire a coach, leverage your time, get creative. Especially what I've learned from my husband's real estate business is you have to get creative. Same with yoga and owning a studio. We have to get creative. There's so many other yoga teachers out there and other yoga studios out there, and we're all unique in our own way. So supporting each other in our own way. And I also often feel sometimes if I'm not able to accommodate something that someone's asking for, although I know this studio does, 100%, I'm going to forward them to that studio because I'm looking at the best interest of what that client wants. So it's always figuring out, asking questions, hiring a coach. There's always a way. So we just have to think outside of the box and stop painting this picture of we have to be that perfectionist inside the box. No, erase that box. Go all in, figure it out, have fun, leverage your time. That's a big one too. I think we were talking about that earlier.
Before we hit record.
Yeah, it's so important. The babysitter, finding some parents or neighbors who can help, hiring an assistant, hiring 2 assistants, hiring a virtual assistant. There are so many avenues out there. And most often we're too afraid to kind of just hit send or ask a question. So get out there and be brave to feel uncomfortable, to get comfortable. That's a good one too.
Mm-hmm. If you have a yoga studio, listen up. Running a yoga studio has never been more complicated. With all the new ways to interact with your current and potential clients, it's really easy to get overwhelmed. The last thing that you need is complicated studio software, slowing you down and zapping your free time. I know so many studio owners who feel frustrated because they're talking to customer support more than they're talking to their students. That's why I'm super, super excited about this latest update from Offering Tree. Offering Tree has added a lot of new features recently to meet the needs of studios. So check out what they have to offer or book a demo call at offeringtree.com/pricing. The right software can help you make more money and spend more time doing what you want to do with your business. And that's why I believe in Offering Tree and the difference their tools can make for yoga studio owners. Who doesn't want to spend more time with students and less time struggling to piece together software? Also, have I mentioned that you can do everything you need to do all in one place with just one payment? So on top of spending less time struggling, you can also spend a little bit less money. I promise I won't be offended if you pause the show for the next minute to head on over to offeringtree.com/pricing to book a demo call. And of course, we have a special discount for you for listening to the show, and that's offeringtree.com/MBOM. So make sure you check that out. All right, now back to the show. Yeah, I feel like so many of these are resonating with me, and I think they're kind of really interconnected, right? Like fear and, getting out of your own way and going all in. Like I really feel like from my own personal experience that, if I'm not succeeding or something is failing, it's because I've kind of stepped in my way. Like I'm the one who's kind of holding myself back because, I'm scared or because, I'm not going all in and that type of thing. So I'm curious. And did we cover all of the tips that you wanted to before I kind of go in a different direction?
I think so. The only last tip I would recommend would be if we're talking yoga studio and business, is to build a client base based on relationships and create the emotional connection. And that's what will get us those members walking through the door is, when you know something about them. My goal is to always learn one thing about someone every time I see them because I'm intrigued. I'm interested. I genuinely do want to know, where are you from? Where are your kids? And then it's our people, it's our tribe.
Yeah, I think too, that's a really important one. And I think something that I saw kind of through like the darkest of the pandemic days was like the studios that I had worked with or the yoga teachers that I had worked with who had created these relationships, like they were the ones who had that community support. Like I know one of the studios that I work with just does an excellent job. Like the studio owner and the teachers are just really great about like creating that emotional connection and really making the space like a space for community. And when we got shut down and lockdowns happened, like the community stepped up and supported. It's like, I'll keep paying my membership even if I can't practice. Oh yeah, I'll come online. What do you need? Do people need passes? Do you need donations? It was just really incredible to see kind of the community step forward, and I feel like that happens when people feel that emotional connection, and that's like years and years of rapport building, right? Like you as the studio owner, the yoga teacher, putting that care into your people who are coming to your studio, and then kind of seeing that come back during this like, obviously really awful situation that we had to go through.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. And during COVID, you really did see people come together. I taught online all during COVID, and it was incredible. New people trying it who've never tried it before, a variety of age groups, youngest to, someone in their 90s. And they're all there because they want to feel a part of something. And, how valuable that they include me and I get to present that to them. And they're here for something that I can offer. So, it's a give and take relationship too. And it's quite amazing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And yeah, just to go back to where I was going to go before. So, talking about this kind of fear and kind of, standing in your own way, I'm curious, for anyone listening who's like, yes, this resonates. I do have fear, maybe some fear of succeeding. I'm kind of standing my own way. I'm my own block. How do you kind of push through the fear or get around the fear or step out of your own way? Do you have any tips that have kind of worked well for you with this?
Yes. And I'd say this is probably the best question because it's very easy for someone to say, let go of fear, get over your fear. And then we say, yeah, but how do I do that? And I get that. I was there too. So what I did is I did a lot of coaching, a lot of brain work as well. What I can recommend is actually go through your fear, break it down. So, for example, if I'm afraid of something, I'll write, say my son's afraid of the dark. So I'm going to write down, he's afraid of the dark. And I'm going to ask him, well, which part are you afraid of? The dark, how quiet it is. And I'm really going to be thorough in my notes. So, for example, he said, how quiet it is. I said, okay. So first, I'm going to say, okay, so I'm going to put some music on. And then we're actually going to we're going to practice walking down the hall in the dark with some music on. Okay. And it took him a bit. And then we're going to say, how do you feel now? And probably have to be some supportive talk there. And then eventually he'll walk down the hall. So what we're doing is we're retraining the brain to be in that similar situation, but now we're playing music. So it's a lot of acknowledging and then retraining. And it can happen we can apply it in any scenario as well. And it's important to know what our triggers and fears are. And sometimes they're not as easy as the example I just shared. Sometimes we have to really dig deep, really get down to it. It could be childhood items. I recommend hiring a coach, a life coach, any mental health advisors or advocates out there. There are lots of them. They can more appropriately help break that down. So I would say step one is to acknowledge what it is. Step two, lay it all out. And then step three, once we've laid it out with the support of someone being there, for example, with my son walking through the hallway and with now music going, which made him realize, oh, okay. And then I would usually take the music away and he walks down the hall. And then we've trained the brain to think, oh, I can do this. I now remember, because I've done it so many times, that it's safe to walk down the hall because usually there's music playing or he can sing a song in his head. And it's through repetition as well, what I've learned with our coaching. So good question.
Yeah, yeah. I was thinking about how it is like, just like you said, it's kind of like, oh yeah, just like let go of the fear. And I think that most of us would like to do that. And it's like, okay, it's Monday morning. Today I'm gonna like get over my fears. And then you sit down at your computer and you're like, I have no idea how to do this. So I think it's nice to have kind of those like practical tips and stuff like that. I'm also curious just kind of what we were talking about before in terms of, creating that emotional connection and, building that community and rapport with your students in a yoga studio. We kind of talked about, having conversations with them, asking questions. Do you have any other tips for how you do this, how you kind of build the rapport with the people who are coming to your classes?
Yes, I do. I actually just switched my marketing system and plan a 360. I've read some really good books and worked with really good coaches. And we started making more of emotional headlines and a little bit more of when people come to class, I have what's called a VIP member. So if they come and they put their email in to become a VIP member, they get free swag, kind of a little bit more informative newsletters. They get just kind of, it's called a fidget. So, and it's not a fidget for what we think. In the marketing world, it's more of like, for example, my first month, if you're a VIP member, I give you a doTERRA essential oil and you get to pick from the ones I have out. For becoming a VIP member and coming to a class in studio, you get to pick an essential oil. So what I do is I've created a system that for my VIPs specifically, I cater to them. I kind of like, they're my baby. I love them. I want to give back to them. I really get into being a part of their life. I talk to them a lot. I text them, hey, how are you feeling today? I always do care calls. So I have a system in place for 12 months. So we do something monthly for them. So if you own your own yoga studio, I'd highly recommend creating some type of system for, your either it could be your VIP clients or maybe it's something different for you and really cater to them because I love when they come and they love the items that they get. And the biggest thing is if I can create that shock and awe the first minute a new person comes in and they are a VIP member, the best way for my business to grow is referral. And what do? They go home, they tell their friends and family, and they say, hey, can you believe I went to this studio and I walked in and I got a doTERRA essential oil? How amazing is that? It's more of a cost than the price of class. So if I create that shock and awe, I know they're coming. And for me, I've had a 75% increase by just implementing that system alone in my classes. And I'm almost sold out in all of my classes. So it does work.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. It's so interesting how something so little can have such like a big impact. Like I think sometimes we think about how we have to do something, large scale or really big and kind of make it this big thing that might be challenging and costly. And, that's like such a small thing that goes a long way.
Correct. Yep. And I could share another way quickly is we need to know where our members are coming from and market to that. So what we were doing before is I was doing, 15,000 mail outs, 25,000 mail outs. And my rate of return wasn't that high. And I got thinking, I thought that's what we're supposed to do. Why is this not working? And then I remember reading this one book and it was talking about, focus on your farm area, which I thought I was doing, but I was going too big. And instead, so I started to niche down and I actually wrote out who my target customer is. And I know we're taught that. What I've seen before is that we're too vague with it. So I got down to, the age group. What color hair did they have? What road did they live on? And once I wrote that out, it dawned on me, my people are about 4 to 7 minute drive from my studio. So I started really marketing to them and doing that fidget to them. And then they brought their sister, they brought their neighbor, they brought, their family member. And then that's how I've started growing is by using that referral and not doing what's called blunt marketing, which is throwing the cast out there and hopefully you get something.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you bring up a really great point there in terms of target markets. I think sometimes, and I know I've gone through this too, it can be really scary to feel like you're limiting who you're serving. So, kind of getting really clear on who your people are. And I actually really like to think about like, could you identify your, ideal client, your target audience, like at the grocery store? Like if you're just walking through, your average supermarket on a day, could you pick somebody out and be like, that person is who I want to teach. That person should come to my studio. And I think people kind of think like, oh, but say there's, 200 people at the grocery store and only one of them is my target audience. Like I should really expand my offering so that I can target all 200. But to me, I'm kind of like, well, you're never going to have an offering that targets like all 200 of those people. And I think that when people see something that's very vague and unclear, it's like they don't know it's for them. And so you kind of lose out on like the people you actually do want there versus, like you said, getting really clear on these people down to, hair color, road they live on, and then they bring other people, right? I feel like it's super interesting.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. Don't go so big so quick and speak their language too. If my demographic is mainly almost retired women, I'm not going to use verbiage that I would use for, moms. So being clear in that as well.
Yeah, I think that's when I work with people who are maybe struggling to get their classes full, I feel like we always look at like the copy they're using, who they're trying to target. And it's kind of interesting. I think I've shared this on the show before, maybe a couple months ago. I was talking with somebody she's in a small community. And I was like, oh, have you tried, putting posters up in the community for your offerings? I think she was teaching like yoga on the beach or something. She's like, oh, yeah, I tried like during the pandemic. It just didn't really work. And I was like, okay, well, is it actually like the posters that you're putting up or is it what's on the posters? Like, do you know who you're attracting through the posters and are you talking directly like to that person you want in class? And she was like, oh, yeah, maybe it's that. And it's kind of interesting because I think we kind of, and I've totally done this before too. It's like, oh, I ran Facebook ads and I spent a bunch of money and like they didn't work. So Facebook ads don't work for me. And it's like, maybe Facebook ads don't work for you because your audience isn't on Facebook, but maybe it's not that. Maybe it's actually, the image you used or the copy you wrote. Like, are you talking to the people that you actually want to be talking to? If that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. The copy is so important and it's very hard to write.
Yeah, for sure. And so you've mentioned a couple things that you've done to kind of attract people to your studio, as like a newer studio that opened, during a time that was a bit challenging. What other things have you done that you feel like have worked really well for your studio that have kind of helped you thrive and be successful?
Yeah, part of my passion is being an advocate for mental health and kids' anxiety as well. And so every year, once or twice a year, I put on my own fundraising events we just did one for Safe and Sound, raising money and donations for tents and socks. I've also done Owen Sound Psychiatric Unit, the whole floor. So I didn't know that they don't have toiletries, socks on hand, and they don't get clothes either. So if they don't have clothes and all they have is a gown, according to my friend who's a nurse, she said they actually can't leave the hospital. So I use fundraising and I am specific in who and what I fundraise. because it needs to resonate with me so I can really be all in with my fundraising. And the last, I think, 2 or 3 years, we've done extremely well. The Sun Times did a write up for the Owen Sound Psych unit we did. And my goal was to double my fundraising the next year. And I did that. And we actually donated $10,000 worth of doTERRA emergency kits. I applied, I was approved. I was partners with a not-for-profit as well. I met Monica. She's incredible. So I started making these connections and doing a little bit more networking. And it brought people in. People want to help. They truly do. I would also stand in front of the grocery store asking for donations. And I brought as many local businesses in that I could. And I offered prizes. If you donated something, your money would go into a draw and you win a prize. So I tried including the community. I was clear on who I was doing fundraising for because it needed to resonate with me and it needed to be a need also. So I used that. And then the second item I did, which I actually just recently published my own e-guide, and it's live now on Amazon. And it's called Parent Survival Guide, the top 10 tips to help your child worry less for back to school. And so these are just all kind of lead magnets that bring people back into the studio. So we have some people who are coming to classes virtually or in studio, or a lady came to our reflexology pop-up shop yesterday and said, I haven't been able to get to your classes, although I really love the info you share. And I love the e-guide that you have too. So all these other items it's my passion. I love doing it. It all fits in, and I make sure I'm clear too and work with a lot of business coaches.
Yeah, all of that is really amazing. So thank you for sharing all of those wonderful tips. Through all your time as a business owner, Jessica, do you have any other kind of business lessons or learnings that you want to share with listeners today?
Of course, there's so many. I think the biggest lesson I've learned is to really, really follow your gut and your instincts. When something kind of, your signs in your body pop up, it's important to listen to them because there's most likely a reason, and the universe is trying to say, hey, I'm trying to get your attention for a minute. Maybe we should shift this, or maybe we shouldn't do that. And for me, it was really tuning into that, which is why we decided to close the large facility we had. And most importantly for me was when someone so close passes away, it really makes you think, life is incredible and it's just an unknown what's happening tomorrow or the next day. So if I'm not showing up for myself, then what does that look like for me? I always ask myself, if I didn't do this, how would I feel? So I need to ask myself that question often. And for my experience, my dad passing away was my motivation to let's go do all the things I want to do. Let's jump in, not worry about it, and let's just see what happens and learn. And I meet these incredible people, like being here with you, Amanda. It's just awesome. I would have never happened if I didn't say, hey, let's go on a podcast.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that just is a really great reminder. Like sometimes it's so easy to get caught up in like the hamster wheel of day-to-day things that we have to do, or get kind of bogged down by the things you should or shouldn't be doing in your business. And I mean, life is this beautiful gift, but it can be a little bit fragile. And like you said, it's like we don't know how much time we have. And I think that, as kind of cheesy cliche as it sounds, like we really do need to make the most of the time that we do have. And I think that something that's always resonated for me, or resonated with me since I was in my early 20s was, if I'm going to spend 40 plus hours a week doing something, I want it to be something that I enjoy, because I don't want to spend into my 60s doing something that's kind of mediocre that I don't really love, and then, be older and maybe not as healthy as I am now, and not be able to do the things that I wanted to do all that time. So I think, kind of like you said, like do the things you want to do and just make the most out of life. And if you're passionate about a business or starting a business, jump into that and do that. And if you're passionate about, taking a break from business and traveling the world, like I would say, do that too. And I think that that's, just a really beautiful reminder for all of us.
Yes, I agree. And I feel it's also important to note is to give ourselves permission that when we say jump in, go all in, it's not, everyone's different. My one girlfriend loves being at home and, just having her tea, watching her movies. And there's nothing wrong with that. For her, she's like, yes, I get to do that now. For me, I'm a mix. Some days I just want to snuggle with my kids in the whole day and we watch movies and we go in the hot tub. That's me living all in that day too. And it's important to give ourselves permission that every day is okay for what we choose.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I think sometimes we think of like living life to the fullest as like, YOLO, I'm going to go, bungee jumping and skydiving and do all these bucket list things. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like that. Like, just like you said, living life to the fullest might be, making popcorn and curling up with your kids on the couch and watching some movies and each taking turns choosing one. Like that can be a really beautiful way to spend some time and, bond with your family members and stuff. Like it doesn't have to be kind of these extreme things that sometimes we think about in terms of like, quote unquote, living life to the fullest.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Amazing. Any other tips you want to share with listeners today?
Yeah, I'll probably be able to share with our time a few more. So I would always say is really know your why. Your why is so important with your business, and it's what's going to hold you into those tough times of being self-employed with our business. So our why is the thing that makes us so clear as to why we're doing what we're doing. So as long as we're clear on what our why is, and what's interesting is when I've worked with other people, I've noticed that they often sometimes use their why as to why they can't run their business, which I find super interesting. So it's important to kind of check in as well. I'll notice people say, well, I can't do that today because I want to go skiing. And I said, well, let's back up. Wasn't your why you really want to do this business so you had more time to go skiing? There is a certain part of our business where we need to be all in and really work it before we get to that time where we can start leveraging out and choosing more of a life by design. I find in real estate often as well is you really have to go in and do those deals. And it's the same with the yoga studio. My year one, I wasn't able to say, okay, I'm good. This is good. I hope people show up. So it's being clear on that why and consistently checking in with that why too, and not using our why as to why we're not able to work the business or why it's not going well. Because usually it's a self-reflection or a projection of something. That's what I've learned.
Mm-hmm.
And another tip would be, it's one of my favorite tips, is it's okay if they don't buy your product, if they don't come to your class. We're not a fit for everybody. And if I meet a client and I can tell right away it's not going to work, I often, get to know them a bit more. I ask more open-ended questions, and then I usually refer or recommend them out to, hey, I know this studio. I feel it would be a really good fit from what you're telling me is that may not be something that I offer. So being okay if they're not for you and referring them out to where you feel they may work. And another tip I would say is recommendation selling. So instead of saying, you should buy this or try this, I've learned is I recommend you try this or I recommend you go here. Really, the verbiage is a bit more softer. We don't sound as forward or sales pitchy. I've found that using that word recommend leads to just way better conversations, and they're softer conversations as well. And another item I would say is marketing and co-marketing. This is my favorite. If anybody knows me, they know I love marketing. It's my favorite. I love it. So marketing, co-marketing, put ourselves out there, go connect with other people, other businesses who are somewhat of a like of your own. What can we do? How can we shift? email list, or could you include me in your email and I'll include you in your email? Or what we often do is we'll do a customer appreciation and I'll pay for the gift card. People put their name in and then the winner gets it. We put it on social media. So it's using the community with each other. So we're using them, they're using us, and also marketing for our own items, which we've kind of touched on that a bit as well, is using the same verbiage and language that our target market is, and being okay that we're not trying to hit everybody with our marketing. And another item is to know your costs. Definitely know your costs. I've met a lot of people who are very unclear with this, and I feel if we're self-employed and this is what's going to feed our family at night, we're not clear in those costs, then who are we showing up for? Because we're not showing up for ourselves or our family. And it's so important. Why would I put myself out there if I don't know my costs and possibly put us in debt with not being clear on when I can purchase, when I can't purchase? So we're taught red light, green light, and you do that, especially in what we call a shifting market right now. So for the facility, the yoga studio, for me, things are picking up. Most commonly, what I've learned from having the larger fitness facility is through the summer, classes drop to 1-2 people. And interestingly enough, for me, I'm up 75%. So it's really being clear in costs, when you can purchase something, when you can't. Also knowing the cost per head of your business and then what you need to sell it for. We have to talk about money. Money can be a positive conversation with ourselves. We don't have to fall into this, that social feeling that it's uncomfortable. We can make it comfortable and be clear, and then we don't really need to worry about it again. Other than I, rebudget every year. That's me personally. Everything in the last year has also gone up in prices, our paper towels, the toilet paper for the studio. Some equipment I learned has gone up. Delivery for that equipment, I just did an order and it was $100 for delivery. So I kind of paused for a moment. I thought, do I really need this? Or why don't I double up my order so I don't have to order again next year? And then I'm good for a year and a half. So it's really being clear on your costs, getting into your marketing, co-marketing, recommendation, selling. It's okay if they don't buy your product, and really stop worrying, period. Stop worrying about it all. Try it, doesn't work. You've learned how not to run your business until eventually you're going to say, hey, I rock at this.
Amazing. I love that perspective. And yeah, I just appreciate all of these tips you shared. I feel like this episode is just jam-packed with goodness. So just really appreciate you sharing your wealth of knowledge and all of that. And I feel like here's probably a good place to wrap up. So I'm curious if you can share with people where they can go to find you, how they can connect with you, all of that good stuff.
Our website is cedarwellnessstudio.ca, Instagram and Facebook. And viewers can also purchase my back to school e-guide on Amazon or our website.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time today, Jessica. This has been really great.
Thank you so much. It was awesome.
All right, yoga teachers, I hope that you enjoyed that episode of the podcast with Jessica Hastings-Lesperance. Make sure you go check her out, give her a follow, see everything that she's up to, and give her a big thank you for sharing so much knowledge and wisdom in this episode. This episode was truly just jam-packed with so much goodness, and I'm so grateful for that. And of course, a big thank you to Offering Tree for sponsoring this episode. Make sure you check them out, offeringtree.com/MBO. And of course, reach out to them or myself if you have any questions about if it's right for you. And a huge thank you to you for listening to the show. I couldn't do it without you, so thank you so much for being here, and I will see you next week. Bye for now. Thank you so much for tuning in for this episode of the podcast. To find links, notes, resources, and everything mentioned in today and all episodes of the show, you can head on over to mbomyoga.com. You can find the podcast and myself on Facebook and social media at Mastering the Business of Yoga. And I would love for you to join the private Facebook community, Yoga Business Badasses. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please make sure you reach out to me at info@mbiomyoga.com. And last of all, if you enjoyed this episode of the show, please make sure you hit subscribe and leave a review for the podcast. It would mean the world. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Namaste.